Good afternoon, children.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Again, a few voices only I could hear. Anyways, I'm not going to say anything. Let's continue with which one? Pollinating agents. We were discussing about different pollinating agents. Two abiotic agents we completed. We are going to proceed with the second category of pollinating agents, that is biotic agents. And as I told you already, biotic agents include living organism, animals. So under animals, different types of groups of animals or different classes of animals can contribute to pollination. So let's see some examples. Biotic agents, majority of flowering plants, they use animals as their pollinating agents. Bees, butterflies, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, moths, birds, sunbirds and hummingbirds. Both of them are small birds. They resemble also somewhat. Sunbirds are also similar to hummingbirds. Then bats, primates like lemur. It's a mammal and it resembles a fox or a cat. Some features of cat. You might have seen lemur. Have you seen the pictures of lemur? If not, I'll show you. Then arboreal, tree-dwelling rodents, reptiles like gecko lizard, garden lizard. These are some of the animals which will help in the pollination of flowers. So here you can see pictures of some animals that contribute to that help in pollination. So what you see in the fourth figure, that is lemur. Not very clear, somewhat. It is an arboreal primate. You can see it on the trees and resembles, as I said, fox, monkey, or even cat. I'll show you a clear picture. Then these are some of the animals that will help in the pollination of flowers. Pollination by insects. So that category alone, when you take, you call it as endomophily. Endomophily is the pollination brought about by insects, and among insects, bee is more common. Pollination carried out by bees is more common among all the other insects. So here you can see a bee bringing about pollination, carrying out pollination, and they too get rewards. They also get nectar, and in return, they help in carrying out the pollination. Often flowers of animal pollinated flowers are specifically adapted for a particular species of animal. So in majority of the cases, this pollinator flower relationship is specific. Means each flower will have some adaptation, some specific adaptations for a particular animal. So that is some this pollinator insect, or what to say, the pollinator flower relationship. You can say it is specific, means each flower, a particular type of flower, they will have some adaptations specifically for its pollinator. So when I give you a few examples, you will understand. So they have, it is not about all the flowers or all the plants, but majority of them, especially in case of animal pollinated ones, they have some specific adaptations to suit a particular species of animal. And some features of insect pollinated flowers, about wind and water pollinated flowers. We discussed about some of the features of these flowers. Similarly, in insect pollinated flowers also, they exhibit some characteristic features in order to facilitate pollination by insects. They'll be large, to be visible, large, colorful, then fragrant, and they'll be rich in nectar. All these are meant for attracting the insects or animals for pollination. Nectar and pollen grains are considered as the floral rewards for pollination. Nectar and pollen grains. So pollen grains, some of the insects, they consume them. And nectar also they take from the flowers. So in return, they pollinate the flowers. As the rewards from the flower, they get pollen and nectar. A mutual benefit is there. A flower is pollinated, flower is getting pollinated by these insects, and in return, insects are getting floral rewards like nectar and pollen. When the flowers are small, so in the beginning I told the flowers will be large in order to be visible to the insects. So in case if these flowers are small, then they will form inflorescence, they'll form a group, a bunch of flowers, so that they'll be visible. Either they'll be large, if small, they'll form a groups known as inflorescence. The flowers pollinate just now. In the features I told, they will have fragrance. But when I say fragrance, not always it can be, it is pleasant smell. Sometimes some of the flowers will produce a foul smell, foul odor, because foul odors also have the ability to attract animals or attract insects. So certain insects, they get attracted to foul smell. Some of them will get attracted to pleasant smell. So it depends. So some of the flowers, they even produce foul odors so as to attract the insects. You might have heard about Amorphophallus, Chena. When it blooms, a very bad smell, a fleshy smell will be produced. Anybody have noted it? Anybody have smelled it? Huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, very bad smell for, I think 1 or 2 days it will last. A fleshy, as if flesh is getting decayed, such a bad smell. That is to attract the insects for pollination. The pollen grains will be generally sticky. When we said about anemophily, I told the pollen grains will be less sticky. It won't be sticky. Only then it can be carried easily by wind. But in case of endomophilus, or in case of flowers which are pollinated by animals or insects, they'll be sticky. Because when they are sticky, when they come in contact with the animals or insects, it can stick to their body. And when the same animal comes in contact with the stigma of another flower, from its body, it can be dusted there, and resulting in pollination. So the pollen grains will be generally sticky, and when the animal comes in contact with the anthers and the stigma, its body will get pollen grains, and when it comes in contact with the stigma, it results in pollination. So the pollen grains are usually sticky, and because of the stickiness, it will stick to the body of the animal. And when the animal's body comes in contact with the stigma, it can get dusted over there, resulting in pollination. Hope you have got it. Same is applicable in the case of insects. They have on their hairy parts of its body, or as such on its body, these pollen grains can stick. And when they come in contact with the stigma of another flower, this can be dusted over there, resulting in pollination. Some flowers provide safe places as floral reward to lay eggs. Already we mentioned about some floral rewards which the flowers will offer to the pollinators, like nectar and pollen grains. And at the same time, certain flowers, they will provide a space to lay the eggs of these insects as a reward, as a floral reward. In return for the pollination process they carry out, they allow the insects to lay eggs inside the plant body. So one such example is Amorphophallus. Amorphophallus, it's a variety of what I said already, Chena. Chena, Amorphophallus is Chena. So a particular variety of Amorphophallus, different varieties are there. And one among them, Amorphophallus, it produces the tallest flower. It comes around 6 feet in height. As you can see in the picture, it produces the tallest flower. It is 6 feet in its height, and this flower will provide space for the pollinated to lay eggs. Another example is yucca plant. Picture I've given. Yucca plant and a moth species. They are in a mutual association, and they are so connected in such a way that either of them cannot complete their life cycle in the absence of the other. If moth species, that particular moth species is not there, yucca plant cannot exist. And if yucca plant is not there, the moth cannot survive. A moth species and the plant yucca cannot complete their life cycles without each other. That is because inside the locule, inside the ovarian cavity of yucca plant, this particular moth will lay the eggs. And in return, the moth is pollinating yucca plant. And when the eggs hatch out and form larva, this will come out of the ovarian cavity. So such a close association is there between both species and yucca. If one of them is not there, if something happens to one of them, the other one will not be able to survive. Okay, so two examples I told you where the plant provides a safe place for laying eggs for the pollinator. The first one is Amorphophallus, and the peculiarity of this particular flower is that it is the tallest flower and it comes around 6 feet in height. And another example is a mutual association between yucca plant and a moth species. Pictures of both you can see here. And the yucca plant permits the moth to lay eggs inside its ovarian cavity. And when these eggs hatch out and form the larvae, they come out of the flower. And in return, the moth species will carry out pollination of the flower. Many insects consume pollen or nectar. So already we said about floral rewards. In return for the work they are doing, the insects are offered floral rewards in return for the pollination process they carry out. But at the same time, there are yet another group of insects. They'll consume pollen and nectar, but they don't take part in the pollination of that flower. In such a case, you call them as pollen robbers or nectar robbers. They take away the pollen and nectar without giving anything in return. So such species, so such insects which do not carry out pollination, but at the same time take away pollen and nectar from the flowers are known as pollen or nectar robbers. So these terms and all you should know. It seems to be silly, but for 1 mark and all it can be asked. Okay, so we'll just quickly recap the points what we said. We started with the biotic agents, animals. So different varieties or different species of animals, they carry out pollination. So some of the examples are mentioned there. And when the pollination is carried out by insects, you call it as endomophily. And among the insect, bee is the most common pollinating agent. And these animal pollinated flowers or plants, they develop some special adaptation to suit its specific pollinator. In theory also, you will be learning some typical examples for the same. Then the features exhibited by insect pollinated flowers. They'll be large, brightly colored, fragrant, and they'll be rich in nectar. But at the same time, certain flowers even produce foul smell also to attract the insects. And when the flowers are normally they'll be large in size, when they are small, they will form groups known as inflorescence. A bunch or a group of flowers together, they form what you call as inflorescence to make the flowers visible to the pollinators. And the nectar and pollen grains will be given by the flower as floral rewards to the pollinators. Just now, but we discussed about another category of insects who take away nectar and pollen, but they don't play any role in the pollination of the flowers. So such insects we call as nectar or pollen robbers. The pollen grains of insect pollinated flowers will be generally sticky, and this is to facilitate the pollen grains to stick to the body of the insects or animals. So when these animal or insect come in contact, when they come in contact with the flowers or with the anthers of these flowers, pollen grains will stick to their body. And again, with these pollen grains, when they come in contact with the stigma of another flower, this can be dusted there unknowingly and will result in pollination. Then about Amorphophallus and Yucca moth, the relationship between Yucca plant and moth species we discussed, and both of them provide safe places for their pollinator to lay eggs. And about pollen robbers, we already discussed. And now we are going to learn about some outbreeding devices. So before we proceed to that, quickly recap the biotic agents of pollination. Punya, you may start.
They are mostly animals consisting of bees, butterflies, beetles, ants, birds,
Name
primates,
a primate which act as a pollinating agent.
lemur,
Lemur. Okay. Then Sania, continue.
The flowers are large, brightly colored, and produce fragrance or attraction. If they are small, they are collected together as inflorescence.
Okay, Gayatri.
In return of pollination, the flower rewards its pollinators with nectar and pollen grains.
Okay. What are the other adaptations, Nandana? Other than being large, colorful, fragrant, and filled with nectar?
certain flowers, they produce foul odors to attract
Then
beetles.
other adaptations, Malavika?
The pollen grains are generally sticky,
Sticky.
so when the animal comes in contact with the anther, the pollen grains get stick to the body of the animal.
And then when the same animal, when it comes in contact with the stigma, it can result in pollination. What else we discuss? Any other point? Sefi, which point is remaining?
They provide safe places to lay eggs as rewards.
Example?
Amorphophallus.
Phallus. Then tell me about the relationship between yucca plant and the moth species, Anna.
Moth species and the plant yucca cannot complete their
Cycle.
life cycle without each other.
Okay.
The
News
moth
reading is going on. Then
deposits,
understand the meaning and say it in your own words. How both of them are benefited? What is the role of moth species? How does it help yucca plant?
the flower gets pollinated by
Yes. And how the moth species is benefited?
its egg. The moth deposits its eggs in
It gets a safe place for laying eggs. Laying eggs?
laying eggs in the
In the locule of the ovary. And how long it will remain there, Anna? These eggs? Forever it will be there?
No.
What happens to those eggs? It will hatch out and form?
Starts developing.
And forms what?
Forms.
Larvae. And these, once it forms larvae, or once these eggs change into larvae, they'll come out of the flower. Then, who are pollen robbers? Malavika?
Some insects consume pollen or nectar without giving anything in reward.
What they have to give in return actually? Without helping in?
Pollination.
Pollination. Those insects are known as pollen or nectar robbers. Now we are going to proceed to the next topic, outbreeding devices. Inbreeding and outbreeding. Inbreeding means self-pollination or self-fertilization. So when self-pollination, self-pollination will lead to self-fertilization. So when this is continued for a long period of time, that can result in a condition known as inbreeding depression. Continuously for a long period, when the self-pollination or self-fertilization is being carried out, there won't be any much variations. Variations will be limited because the genetically the same plant is involved. The same plant or the flowers in the same plant are involved. So continuously, if this is carried out for a long period of time, this can lead to a situation known as inbreeding depression. So in order to overcome this inbreeding depression, the plant has its own some devices, has some techniques are there devised by the plants in order to promote outbreeding and to reduce inbreeding depression. So let's see more about those outbreeding devices. Hermaphrodite flowers can undergo self-pollination. Means when both male and female reproductive organs are found in the same plant, means same flower, this can carry out self-pollination. Continued self-pollination that can lead to a condition known as inbreeding depression. You know, self-pollination will result in self-fertilization. So the combination of recombination of characters will be less, variations will be less because no other plant is involved. It's limited to the same plant. So this can result in reduction in variations or inbreeding depression. The productivity, the yield and all, it can gradually get reduced. To avoid self-pollination and to encourage cross-pollination, there are some techniques in plants. So we will see what are those different techniques found in plants in order to promote cross-pollination and to resist or to avoid inbreeding depression. I'll repeat once again. When self-pollination is carried out repeatedly for several generations, this can lead to a situation known as inbreeding depression, which can lead to the reduction in its productivity, its variations will be limited, productivity and yield can get reduced in the long run. So in order to avoid that, the plant has some techniques to promote cross-pollination. So we'll see what are those techniques. First one, avoiding synchronization. We'll see the details. Avoiding synchronization. Second point, arrangement of anther and stigma at different positions. Third one, self-incompatibility. And fourth one, production of unisexual flowers. These are some of the outbreeding devices. You can be asked to explain the different outbreeding devices found in plants. First one, avoiding in order to facilitate autogamy. We learned about synchrony between two events. Anybody is remembering? I told that if self-pollination, if autogamy should take place, there should be synchronization between dash and dash. Nandana?
Stigma receptivity.
Yes, receptivity of the stigma and pollen release. So same is here also applicable. So I'll be explaining it. First of all, let's see all the four major headings: avoiding synchronization, arrangement of anther and stigma at different positions, self-incompatibility, production of unisexual flowers. All these will promote cross-pollination. Now let's see how each one is promoting cross-pollination. We'll start with the first one, avoiding synchronization. Here, the pollen is released before the stigma becomes receptive. Even before the stigma is ready to receive it, pollen will be released. So when its own stigma is not receptive, it will move to other flowers. Or the stigma becomes receptive before the release of pollen. I'll repeat again. Pollen will be released before the stigma is becoming receptive. or even before the release of pollen, stigma becomes receptive. So when the stigma is receptive and its own pollen are not ready, then the other flower's pollen can fall on it and result in cross-pollination. If synchronization, if there is synchronization between the receptivity of the stigma and release of the anther of the same flower, chances of self-pollination will be more. So in order to avoid that, the plant has its own some devices by means of which it avoids synchronization so as to promote cross-pollination and to reduce inbreeding depression. So what synchronization should be avoided? How it has to be, how it is avoided? The pollen will be released before the stigma is becoming receptive, or stigma becomes receptive and later only pollen will get released. Stigma becomes, in the first one, pollen release is the first event and later only the stigma is becoming receptive. In the second one, the first event taking place, the stigma is getting receptive. Then later only the pollen will be released. So both are not taking place both events are not taking place simultaneously or at the same time. So that will facilitate chances for cross-pollination. Any explanation needed?
Oh, ma'am.
It prevents autogamy and facilitates facilitates xenogamy. It prevents autogamy, promotes cross-pollination, avoiding synchronization. Once again, I will repeat, two events are there. Pollen release, stigma receptivity. Either pollen will be released before the stigma is getting receptive, or stigma becomes receptive and later the pollen release will take place. Anyhow, in both cases, both events will not be taking place at the same time. No synchronization between stigma receptivity and pollen release. This will help in avoiding autogamy and promoting cross-pollination. Moving to the second one, arrangement of anther and stigma at different positions. So in order to promote autogamy, under autogamy we learned that if autogamy should take place, anther and stigma should be placed at close location, or they should lie close to each other. So plant or the flower, by this nobody can do. It is its own some techniques. The plant itself, in nature itself, these are some of the techniques seen. So the anther and the stigma, if they are placed at different location, the chances for autogamy can be reduced. This also prevents autogamy. Third one, self-incompatibility. It's a genetic mechanism to prevent self-pollen. Self-pollen means that flowers on pollen from fertilization by inhibiting pollen germination or pollen tube growth in the pistil. You know that once pollen falls on the stigma, pollen should germinate, then it should form a pollen tube, and then the pollen tube carrying the male gamete should grow towards the ovule to bring about fertilization. That is a normal procedure. But in this case, it's a genetic mechanism. Even if the pollen lands on the stigma, its own pollen, when it lands on the stigma, it exhibits self-incompatibility. Means if the pollen belongs to the same flower, the pollen won't be allowed to germinate, or even if it is germinating, the pollen tube formation will be prevented, so that self-fertilization or self-pollination will not become successful. So it's a genetic mechanism inherent in the plants. So these are some devices which scientists have observed in plants in order to reduce the chances of self-pollination and to promote cross-pollination. Why? Because continuously self-pollination takes place, then it can lead to inbreeding depression, reduction of its productivity, yield will be reduced, productivity will be affected. Okay, so self-incompatibility means it is a genetic mechanism by means of which self-pollen is prevented from getting or self-pollen will not be allowed to fertilize the flower or fertilize the egg by inhibiting pollen germination or pollen tube growth in the pistil. Hope you have understood. See, if imagine, so just forget about this flower and the pollen of this same flower, it falls on its own stigma. So if self-incompatibility is existing, what happens is this pollen will be rejected. Normal condition, when the pollen falls there, it should germinate and then this pollen tube should grow towards the ovule. But if there is a self-incompatibility existing in that flower, the pollen won't be allowed to germinate. Even if it is permitted to germinate, pollen tube formation will not be allowed to take place. Then in such a case, self-pollination cannot be completed. Then it will facilitate cross-pollination. Have you understood? Have you understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now the last one, production of unisexual flowers. Fourth one, no children, numbering is wrong. Fourth one, production of unisexual flowers. You know that some flowers produce bisexual flowers, some produce unisexual flowers. So producing unisexual flowers also will help in preventing self-pollination to certain extent. So bisexual means within the same flower, both male and female reproductive parts will be there. So chances are more. But if unisexual flowers are produced, it will have either stamen or pistil. So by producing unisexual flowers also, you can reduce the chances of self-pollination. If male and female flowers, so unisexual flowers means two types of flowers, male and female flowers will be produced. In certain plants, male and female flowers can be produced on the same plant. Like in case of maize and castor, same plant, both type of flowers will be there. Some flowers will be pistillate, means female flowers, and some flowers will be staminate, means they'll be having only stamen. It can be found in the same plant. And there are certain other plants where male and female flowers will be produced on two different plants, like papaya. Female flowers will be produced in one plant and male flowers will be produced in another plant. Anmarum, penmarum. And even in nutmeg. Nutmeg also you can find both male and female flowers. Male and female plant you can say. Because male plant will have only male flowers and female plant will have only female flowers. Okay. So production of unisexual flowers, that also will help in preventing self-pollination. And these unisexual flowers can be produced on the same plant or on different plants. In both cases, it will reduce the chances of self-pollination. And if you take the case of maize and castor, as I told you, they produce female flowers and male flowers. Male and female reproductive parts are not in the same flower, but in two different flowers. But still, they are found on the same plant. So there, it will avoid autogamy, but geitonogamy can take place. Chances of geitonogamy will be there. Autogamy can be prevented definitely because both are not in the same flower. But if these flowers, male and female flowers, are found on the same plant, chances of geitonogamy will be there, even though they can avoid autogamy. Okay. But when it comes to dioecious plants means male and female in two different plants. Male and female flowers in two different plants. Here you can see a male papaya tree with male flowers, female papaya tree with female flowers. And you can find them on different plants. And here both geitonogamy and autogamy can be avoided and will promote cross-pollination. Have you understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we will have a recap of the same and
Ma'am,
oh,
could you repeat the first point? Monoecious.
this one. Wait,
Yes,
wait.
ma'am.
Okay, just a minute. The fourth outbreeding device that we discussed is producing unisexual flowers. Unisexual flowers means in a particular flower, either male or female reproductive part will be present. Both won't be present in the same flower. But unisexual flowers, it can be produced on the same plant. 1 minute, I'll show you. See, imagine this is a plant and here just imagine this is a male flower, this is female flower. Okay. But same plant. This is on the same plant. These are unisexual flowers, male flowers, female flowers, but they are present in the same plant. So definitely autogamy will not take place. If autogamy has to take place, the anther of a flower or the pollen grains from the anther of a flower should fall on the stigma of the same. Here that is not possible. Here only male part, only female part in the other flower. Clear, Nandana? And
Yes, ma'am.
since they are on the same plant, the pollen grains from the male flower can fall on the stigma of another flower belonging to the same plant. So geitonogamy can take place. That cannot be avoided. Okay? But autogamy can be prevented. Autogamy will be avoided because both male and female parts are not there in the same flower. So autogamy can be avoided, but it is not possible to avoid geitonogamy because the same flower will have same plant will have male and female flowers. Example, maize, castor, etc. And at the same time, in case of papaya, nutmeg and all, they don't have male and female flowers in the same plant. Male papaya tree, female papaya tree. In male plant or tree, male flowers only will be produced. And in female tree, only female flowers will be there. So there, both autogamy and geitonogamy can be avoided because a particular, you know that autogamy and geitonogamy takes place within the same plant. But here, either male flowers or female flowers will be found in the same plant. So definitely autogamy and geitonogamy can be prevented and cross pollination or xenogamy can be promoted. Have you understood, Nandana?
Yes, ma'am.
Children, hope you have understood the different outbreeding devices, why it is necessary to carry out or to have some outbreeding devices in plants. Donna, what is the significance of these outbreeding devices? Donna,
Yes, ma'am.
what is the significance of outbreeding devices?
The techniques or
I'm not asking you to list out. Why? Why it is necessary? To avoid what, Donna? To avoid what?
autogamy,
to
self-pollination,
That will
continuous self-pollination.
Self-pollination will lead to
Yeah, inbreeding depression.
depression. In order to avoid inbreeding depression and to facilitate cross-pollination, these outbreeding devices are essential. So more about outbreeding device, or if you want me to explain it again, I'll do. It's already time. So please do read it and come. I'll repeat outbreeding devices again in the next class. Okay. So we'll wind up. So before that,